Thank you very much for your introduction, Sebastian. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the organizers of the conference. So, the topic I will address today is the use of mechanical music by show people working on European fun fairs approximately from 1870 to 1930. More specifically, I will examine the constitution of their repertoire, which goes along with the development of instruments conceived to be used on fairgrounds. Today, I will highlight the total integration of music in the design and the function of attractions of the time. Considering this primacy of music in the entertainment devices displayed on fairgrounds, I will question how the way that music was produced, transmitted, and played is linked with the way these attractions were used. So the question I would like to raise is the role that such a link, such a connection, may have played in the transition from the use of one type of recorded music to another. In other words, how should we interpret the transition from notational programming techniques to acoustical records in the funfair context? This is part of my ongoing doctoral project, which is itself integrated in the Swiss National Science Foundation funded project named The Musical World of Fairgrounds in Switzerland, 19th-21st Centuries, led by Professor Anna Stolknecht at the University of Fribourg. This project, overall, aims to clarify the role of music on the fairground and how music contributed to structure such a social area, both in its whole internal way of functioning and through its links to other institutions. So to start with, I would like to provide some basic information about the fairground organ for those who are not familiar with it. This instrument owes its name to its increasing presence on European fairgrounds from the second half of the 19th century. Initially a simple barrel organ, linked to different audiovisual practices such as ballad pictures show, magic lanterns or rarity shows, it gradually developed into an orchestra machine. As its size and loudness increased, it was able to play with a larger set of different timbres. It also became a highly sophisticated object on the visual level, being decorated with exuberant Baroque or Rococo facades and carved figures, which were sometimes animated. This particular kind of organ appeared as the attractions on fairgrounds evolved by integrating new technological features, such as steam engines, to put them into motion. Integrated with merry-go-rounds, roller coasters, Ferris wheels, bumper cars, and early cinema venues, they were an important tool to catch the attention of bypassers. Moreover, since around 1900 most of these attractions were motorized, the music of the organs had to cover the noise of their engines. Concerning the storage of musical data on material support, three types of systems have been used. The first one is the pin cylinder, which has already been a feature of the barrel organ. The second system is the perforated cardboard, which was patented in 1892 and became a distinctive characteristic of the fairground organ. And the third solution, analogous to the cardboard, is the paper roll used in the wake of the player piano industry. In this presentation, I will focus on the cardboard format. If we now turn to the music that was notated on these supports, the repertoire appears to be typical of what was played by military bands in the second half of the 19th century. This is not surprising, given that brass bands constituted the major musical force of the time, and the most easily accessible opportunity for the general public to attend concerts. Playing on the streets, in parks and in cafes, they inaugurated a new way to consume music and thus contributed to establish, around the middle of the 19th century, the notion of popular music. And it was precisely the popularity of military bands that led to the construction of fairground organs, conceived to replace a full human orchestra. This motivation is explicit in the design of some of the organs, which sometimes includes a full band made of animated figures. It is also emphasized in the builder's marketing process, such as in this catalog by the Gebr. Bruder Company, where we can read The organ is equipped with all orchestra effects, from the soft piano to the most powerful fortissimo, and is able to reproduce correct interpretations of the most difficult compositions. Musical effect of about 80 musicians. End of quote. Looking at the advertisements of the time, we can see that the use of the orchestra machines was closely related to the management of entertainment businesses. For example, on the left, this announcement by Gavioli, published in the official journal of the French Show People Syndicate, informs us about organs reproducing military concerts and made especially for members of the profession. On the right, this advertisement by Chiappa & Sons, a company based in London, insists once again on the advantages of the organ as a substitute for human bands, this time for skating rinks and dancing saloons. Fairground organs were thus meant to restitute the experience of the military band, not only in its loudness and its musical presence, but also and foremost its repertoire. This appears quite clearly in the comparison between these two documents. On the left, we see an advertisement published in a newspaper from Bern for a concert that took place on the 9th of July 1876 at the Bee Hubeli, a restaurant where concerts were and are still frequently held. On the right, this is an excerpt of a musical perforated cardboard catalogue by the German organ building company Ruth & Sohn. And although there is a gap of almost 50 years between these two documents, a lot of similarities can be found between the concert program and the catalogue. Two pieces, for example, are present in both publications: Bellini's Norma Ouverture and a potpourri from La Fille de Madame Angot, an opera comique composed by Charles Lecoq. Besides, the typology of other pieces is quite unsurprisingly distributed between the march, the waltz, and the quadrille, as well as overture and other excerpts coming from theater or symphonic music. This is consistent with the practice of military bands playing throughout Europe, and it informs us about the kind of place show people wanted to make the fanfare sound like. Indeed, the organization of bands' performances in public space were part of a widespread political effort to promote what has been called rational recreation. The main purpose of such initiative was to provide working class with occupations that were deemed morally acceptable by the bourgeoisie and ruling elites. One of the main arguments in favor of open-air performances was to conciliate leisure and education. During the intense period of industrialization and urbanization that characterized the end of the 19th century, fanfares became an essential part of urban entertainment, especially for middle and working classes. Beyond amusement, they were also considered as places where to learn or fantasize about scientific novelties and colonial activities, projecting an idealized Western modernity. The fact that mechanical organs contributed to epitomize this modernity is partly due to the way they and their music were produced, that is, in factories. Again, this was a selling point for companies of the time, which demonstrated their adherence to a rhetoric celebrating mass production as progress. This implied a manufacturing model based on division of labor, both in the building of the instruments and in the production of perforated cardboard or paper rolls. Here, we see the last stage of the music production, that is, the perforation of the supports that would be read by the organs. These pictures show facilities located in the two main European centers of fairground organ construction in Europe, which are Waldkirch, southern Germany, and Paris. The stage before perforation is the transcription from the score to a paper strip that will serve as a pattern model for the folded cardboard. At this point in the process, specific tools were needed, such as this music marking cylinder that allows to visualize both the music notated on staves and the encoding of the storage medium, which determine the notes' occurrences and length when played by the organ. Here we can see a comparison between perforated music and traditional staff notation. A third element that links the two former ones is the scale of the instrument, which is fixed above the cylinder so that the music marker can locate which part of the width of the strip corresponds to each note. The task of music markers has been described as a remarkably complex one, not only because of the laborious nature of the transcribing, but also because each model of organ has its own particular musical scale and its own set of stops. The majority of the instruments did not have fully chromatic scales. This situation sometimes necessitated to transpose some pieces or to rewrite some passages that might not have been playable by the instrument. More generally, the instrument itself imposed a specific kind of musical writing, since, as a replica of a full orchestra, it had its pipes distributed between different sections, generally four, which are bass, accompaniment, melody, and counter-melody. The task of the arranger was thus to adapt the original work to the sonic forces of the organ. Moreover, the information recorded on cardboard or paper rolls were not mere sequences of pitches, but served to control the different registers, the percussion devices, as well as visual elements such as the movements of the card figures and the lights effects. Therefore, the work done by music markers and organ builders in general went beyond the supply of accessory sonification of the funfair's attractions, but contributed to shape them as multisensorial experiences. Far from being incidental, the music played by organs was thought as a core element of the devices run by show people. Since music was at the center of their activity, this leads us to the question of how show people selected the music played on fairgrounds and how they interacted with music suppliers. As observed with the catalog by Ruth shown on a previous slide, organ builders constituted stocks of musical pieces that were ready to order and to use, and included long-time classics as well as more ephemeral successes. It was also possible to require arrangements made on demand for the organ's owners. This is what is explained in this interview's excerpt given by the Swiss showwoman Blanche Tissot, and in which she offered a glimpse on the production process. The fact that personal ties and direct encounters between actors occurred reinforced the strong involvement of music makers in the development of the fairground rides. Besides, this highlights the similarities between funfair show people and other music artists. For instance, the possibility of having a musical transcription done by simply whistling a tune is something that has been reported in a completely different place but around the same time. In his 2002 dissertation, David Swissman studied the marketing networks that developed between American songwriters, managers, and publishers in the early 20th century. He wrote, quote, "Many in Tin Pan Alley who played and sang well by ear had to rely on professional arrangers to transcribe their ideas. Some houses, like T.B. Harms, offered custom arranging. One songwriter remembered, you could go to Harms and for $2 get a frail young man who worked there to make a piano arrangement of a whistle tune or score it for orchestra." End of quote. This parallel helps us to get a better idea of the relationship between show people, who have sometimes been called impresarios, and their instruments. It reveals indeed the emerging context of music consumption inside of which these entrepreneurs navigated, and how well-crafted music played by a good instrument could serve as a self-promotional asset. We can surely define the fairground organ as a tool used to situate oneself, both sonically and physically on the spot where show people worked, and professionally as a marker of status and taste among the connoisseurs of such machines. However, although the instrument is often described as the perfect substitute for human orchestra, and so as a technological achievement, the technology itself was barely visible to the fairground visitor. This photograph by Eugène Adjet provides us with a good and a rare example of what is how to remain hidden, as it shows a dark circus on the side of which an organ is exhibited. The facade of the instrument is thematically linked to the show, with a dark figure standing on its back legs and another figure, probably its tamer. Pipes and trumpet resonators also occupy the forefront. But the mechanism of the instrument is completely invisible. Another figure, almost invisible from the front of the circus, is the organ grinder, whom the photographer captures here, and who is in direct connection with the mechanism as he turns the wheel that put into motion the music support and the bellows blowing air in the pipes. Although the identity of this person is unknown and his status unclear, is he a regular show person, the owner of the attraction, or just someone hired to crank the organ during the shows? The fact that he must be concealed from the audience sight corresponds to the usual use of the organ. This is also the case when the organ is automated by steam power, as in this example. Here we can see a slide run by the German showman Franz Anton Bausch. I don't know if there is a connection with our session chair for this session. And on the left, the steam engine that supplied energy for the moving walkway going up to the tower, but also for electrical lights and for the organ. You can see the instrument highlighted in green at the forefront. This demonstrates once again the integration of the instrument in the attraction as a whole, but also the will to cover up the materials and the people at work to make it function. And perhaps this could be related to the question of absence in mechanical instruments. We could discuss about it. So such a separation between the visible areas and the sources of sound can surely be traced back to the early stages of the use of mechanical music. Some authors, such as David Lathridge, have studied the constitution of European audiovisual culture at the end of the 18th century that was built partly on the new kind of spectacles combining optical devices and mechanical music. In this book, she describes how the tension between what is visible and what is not has contributed to shape musical production and reception of early Romanticism. Such a tension is also analyzed by Stephen Walker in his study of fairgrounds attractions' frontages. His work on the surface effect produced by attractions offers interesting possibilities to interpret the concealment of music reading systems behind facades, but also the conjoint disappearance of both systems and facades during the 1930s. It is indeed at the same time that the general aesthetics of rides changed and that organs progressively fell into disuse, to be replaced by gramophones, radio, and loudspeakers. This concomitance invites us to question the explanations usually given about this change, that is, economical concerns or technical obsolescence of the organs. Given that these instruments, the organs, tended to remain in use on the rise from the 1890 to 1910 period, which became attractions for children, for most of them, it seems more fruitful to consider that they proved inadequate for the new ways show people developed to demonstrate modernity. In terms of repertoire, it is at this point difficult to know what records were played, but it is probable that jazz and other American genres and dance music were the most commonly heard. What is, however, certain is that the connection between show people and disc producer was never as close as with the organ manufacturers. This connection partly explains the renewed interest in organs that began in the 1950s and that goes on today, as communities of show people assert the heritage value of their activity over centuries. So what I've tried to show today is by what means such a connection could exist and how it has materialized, resulting in music collection that still wait for further research. Thank you very much.